Now we saying, yeah, though. Pull up stunt. Yeah, though. Yeah, though. Ice game flood. Yeah, though. Yeah, though. Every day I'm hustling. You know what it is, baby?
Y'all are now tuned into Talkin' Sports with Chris Mesa.
Hey y'all, this is Talkin' Sports with Chris Mesa, and you are here for the kickoff of episode 6. Thank you for tuning in. So on today's show, we're going to talk about the NFC South. And what that means is we're going to talk about each team in the division and the free agency moves that they all made. We're going to talk about the NFL draft picks they made with the NFL 2022 draft. And then we're going to make my way too early predictions of how this division's going to play out this NFL season. So that's going to be the meat of the episode as usual right now in the NFL offseason. It's one of the craziest that it's ever been in the history of the NFL. It's been a really fun one to watch and a fun one to cover. So we're going to dive into the NFC South today. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the NBA playoffs, and we're going to talk about the Eastern and Western Conference Finals and how each game one panned out this week. And then we're going to talk about the Canelo fight that happened. And then to wrap this show up, we're going to talk about UFC 274 and what happened to cause a lightweight champion to lose his belt before the fight happened. Okay? So I'm excited for this show. Let's get it kicked off. Let's do this. Let's get started. So the NFC South consists of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons, and the New Orleans Saints. We're going to kick this off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So let's talk about a couple of losses that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had this offseason. Tom Brady retired. Just kidding. I think we all know that by now. After 40 days of retirement, Tom Brady decided to come back. He's coming back for another NFL season. So let's talk about some legit losses that the Bucs experienced this offseason. First, they lost guard Alex Kappa, tight end O.J. Howard, and running back Ronald Jones. In particular there, Ronald Jones is kind of a big loss. They do still have Leonard Fournette, but losing Ronald Jones, it's kind of big because, man, he was a threat out of the backfield in the passing game. He was definitely a reliable check down there for Tom Brady when things were covered downfield. So losing Ronald Jones hurts a little bit for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So let's talk about some new players that they picked up this NFL offseason in the free agency. First things first, they signed safety Logan Ryan from the Giants to a 1-year deal. Logan Ryan is a veteran who has been in the league since 2013. He was a very productive safety for the Giants last year with 117 tackles. So bringing him in is definitely going to help their defense and help that secondary unit out a little bit. The next pickup that they picked up was wide receiver Russell Gage from the Atlanta Falcons. He had a decent year with the Falcons last year with 770 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns. He looks to start at the slot wide receiver position for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. I think that was a good pickup to fill out that wide receiver unit. Russell Gage is going to help out there and fill in really well at the slot receiver position for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Good pickup, and took them from their division rival as well. Good pickup, Tampa Bay. As far as free agency moves and stuff, it's short and sweet for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's pretty much the extent of the Buccaneers' free agency moves this offseason. They retained a lot of key role players such as running back Leonard Fournette and cornerback Carlton Davis, and they also franchise tagged wide receiver Chris Godwin, who had 1,100 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns last year. So keeping him around another year, they didn't necessarily reach a deal with Chris Godwin, so to say. But, man, to fill out their wide receiver core and units, keeping him was a huge deal for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they'll work on trying to figure that out next year. And hopefully Chris Godwin has another good season with them this year. Moving on, let's talk about the draft picks that happened for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They did not have a pick in round 1, so let's skip. Let's fast forward right ahead to round 2. In round 2, they picked up Logan Hall, defensive tackle from Houston. Logan Hall at the University of Houston, he had 47 tackles and 6 sacks. He's 6'6" and 280 pounds. I think the Bucs need to figure out what they want to do with him. He's a little slim for defensive tackle. Experts think he would be a good defensive end in a 3-man front, which is exactly what the Bucs play as their base defense. So Logan Hall could be just what they need right next to Villa manning the nose tackle position there for them, okay? Villa is holding it down. He's the anchor right there in the defensive front. Put Logan Hall next to him. Man, they're really starting to fill out more pieces to their puzzle here by picking up Logan Hall. Let's move on to the next pick. The Bucs still had another pick in round 2, and they picked up Luke Godecki, tackle from Central Michigan. He's 6'5" and 312 pounds. The Bucs look to move him to guard, which seems like a good move. This looks like a depth move to continue to protect their 44-year-old quarterback who just came back from retirement, right? So that's what it is. They just beefed up the line there with that pick, and it's a pretty good pick. They probably could have saved that for later in the draft, but they've got a good-looking team. I'm sure most folks aren't angry with that pick, so good pick for the Bucs right there. Moving on to round 3, they picked up running back Rachaad White from Arizona State. Rachaad White, he rushed for 1,000 yards last season at Arizona State, but the thing that I like is that he had over 400 receiving yards out of the backfield. That's big because Fournette is a good between the tackles running back, and remember, Ronald Jones just left this offseason, and he was good at catching passes out of the backfield. So it looks like the Bucs want Rachaad White to replace Ronald Jones with that production, and he looks to be capable of doing that, okay? So, man, keep a close eye on that. I think he has a good chance to really come into the games early this season and kind of, be there in the passing game, be there for checkdowns for Tom Brady. And so you might hear Rachaad White for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here right off the bat, okay? Moving on to the next pick. Round 4, Cade Otton, tight end from Washington. O.J. Howard, again, we talked about how he left, and he wasn't a productive tight end at all. And Rob Gronkowski, who's still not committed to coming back, keep in mind, Rob Gronkowski also retired this offseason. Since Tom Brady came back, Rob Gronkowski has been on social media. He's flirted with coming back or not coming back. And, as of the recording of this show, he has not committed to come back yet. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers, business as usual. In round 4, they take Cade Otton, tight end from Washington. So with Rob Gronkowski leaving, the tight end position's a position of need, really, for the Buccaneers. I'm not sure if Cade Otton is the tight end that's, going to be the guy that replaces Rob Gronkowski, but it was definitely a position of need. Cade Otton, he's not the best pass catcher, but he's decent in finding open spaces. And let's not forget, Tom Brady is about to be his QB. He can probably contribute as a blocker in big sets for the running game. So this is not a bad pickup in round 4, especially considering the current condition of this position on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster. Okay. Next pick, round 5. Zion McCollum. He's a big 6'2" cornerback from Sam Houston State. The Bucs look to take him on as a project. Taking their chances here and seeing how he works out with a round 5 pick. Round 6, tight end Cole Kieft. Big but slow, but it's clear the Bucs hope to find a tight end to help out some. With Rob Gronkowski gone now, O.J. Howard gone, clearly they need to find a tight end. So they look to the draft to try to do that, okay? So how about the Buccaneers? We've just gone over their draft picks. We've gone over their free agency moves, their losses, their pickups. How does this whole team look moving into the season now? This team is solid. The offense has 4-time Pro Bowl receiver Mike Evans, who had 1,000 yards receiving and 14 touchdowns last season returning. They have wide receiver Chris Godwin returning on the opposite side of Evans. And Tom Brady tricked us all. He's not retiring, so he's back. The 14-time Pro Bowl QB is coming back for another season. 14 Pro Bowl elections. Okay, so that's huge. And Tom Brady's coming back. He hasn't lost a step. Man, the Bucs are going to be on fire again this year, is what I expect, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They did lose some offensive linemen this offseason, but have worked in free agency to replace what they have lost. And Leonard Fournette is back. That's a good running back there in the backfield. Logan Hall and Rachaad White should be able to step right in and help the team out from the start of the season as soon as that ball is kicked off, okay? Moving on to the defense, Pro Bowl linebacker Devin White is back to lead the way for a good defensive unit. The past 2 seasons, Devin White has had an amazing 268 tackles and 12.5 sacks. That is ridiculous. This guy's been lights out. Up front, we've discussed it a little bit already. Big Vita Vea has some help coming from the second round, with Logan Hall being on the other side of him on the defensive front. So Vita Vea and Logan Hall, that shapes up to be 2 good pieces to that 3-man front that the Bucs like to run. One thing that I didn't quite mention up top, but it's worth mentioning now in the summary because he'll help the depth of this defense and the secondary of this defense. Keanu Neal was also picked up this offseason, and he should help their defense, all around here. He's a safety linebacker hybrid type player. They pick him up from my Dallas Cowboys, and I think he's just going to be able to help this unit wherever they need him to play. So good pickup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right there with Keanu Neal. Next, Carlton Davis is at cornerback, and he's coming back. The rest of the secondary is pretty average, but I'm not sure much more than average is needed with the front 7 that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have. Devin White, Vita Vea, even Logan Hall coming in. That front 7 looks to be pretty good. So I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, again, they're no joke this season, and I think they're a force to be reckoned with, especially here in the NFC South. So let's move on to the next team. Next up, there we go. We got the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to talk about them boys down there in ATL. Let's talk about what they lost right off the bat. 4-time Pro Bowl and franchise quarterback for them for a long time, Matt Ryan. He's moving out of the ATL and he's going over to the Indianapolis Colts. Wide receiver Russell Gage, we just talked about that in the section above because they lost him to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They lost linebacker Foyesade Oluokun to the Jaguars. That's a big loss because that was a lot of production right there in the middle of that defense. Oluokun had 192 tackles for the Falcons last year. Okay, so they're going to have to replace that production. He's gone now. Another loss was safety Deron Harmon to the Raiders. Edge rusher Dante Fowler came over to my Dallas Cowboys. I'm real excited about that pickup. He's a seasoned veteran, but I think he can help my Cowboys for the next couple years or so. But we're not talking about my Cowboys, so let me get back to it. ATL, your Atlanta Falcons. Next, they lost right tackle Matt Gono to the Giants, and then they lost running back Mike Davis to the Ravens. A lot of people know that name, Mike Davis. It seems like a huge loss, but it's really not so big. He only averaged less than 4 yards a carry for the Falcons over the past couple seasons. So I think it's okay for Mike Davis to be moving on. Now let's talk about who the Atlanta Falcons picked up this offseason, right? Okay, so Matt Ryan's gone. You got to pick up a quarterback, correct? Correct. And that's what they did. But is it what they need? We'll find out soon enough. What they did is they went out and picked up quarterback Marcus Mariota. He's been a backup for the Raiders the past 2 seasons. His best season by far was in 2016, his second year in the NFL and with the Tennessee Titans. Mariota then threw for 3,426 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. He gradually fell off after that, and he was replaced by Ryan Tannehill. He gets a chance to start again, and he's going to be starting for the Atlanta Falcons is what it looks like this year, okay? So let's see how that pans out. Matt Ryan gone. Marcus Mariota, QB1 in the ATL. Let's see how it goes. The next pickup for the Atlanta Falcons was linebacker Nick Kwiatkowski from the Las Vegas Raiders again. His best season was in 2020 with 81 tackles for the Raiders. He's coming back from an injury last season where he only played 8 games last season. The guy still has some football left in him is what it looks like, and him coming into the Atlanta Falcons, man, does he replace Oluokun? Ooh, I don't know, but it looks like that's what they're trying to do. Definitely have to fill that position of need, as I mentioned, and what they've done is they've brought Nick Kwiatkowski in from the Raiders. Okay. Next, they brought in offensive tackle Jermaine Fetty from the Chicago Bears. Next, they picked up cornerback Casey Hayward from the Las Vegas Raiders. I kind of like that pickup. And then they also picked up, last but not least, wide receiver Brian Edwards, again from the Las Vegas Raiders. Brian Edwards last season for the Raiders had 571 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns last year. So let's move on to the draft picks for the Atlanta Falcons because they lost a lot of production. Doesn't look like they replaced it all in free agency. So let's see what they did with their draft picks. And before we dive into these draft picks, let's talk about that. You know, the Atlanta Falcons had, they have had, this offseason, they've had one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the country. So did they do anything to help that out, with their new quarterback coming in? Did they give him some receivers to target? Let's see. Let's dive into their draft picks now. They had a pick in round 1, and they picked up wide receiver Drake London from USC. Drake London had 1,084 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns last year for USC. He's a big target at 6'4" and 210 pounds. This was massively needed for the Falcons. Their wide receiver room was a joke, honestly. So picking him up, they're definitely trying to address that. London has lots of potential, but receivers like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, and George Pickens were still available for the Falcons to pick, but they went Drake London. Again, all those receivers are good, but did the Atlanta Falcons make the right choice picking Drake London? We'll find out as time goes on, but they did get a good receiver. I don't want to get hung up on that too much. Let's keep moving. We'll know quickly if that was the right move for them or not. Moving on, round 2. They picked up Arnold Ebiketie, edge rusher from Penn State. This is a monster of an edge rusher from this 2022 draft class. I like this a lot because him and Lorenzo Carter will be a nice combo on the edges for the Atlanta Falcons. Ebiketie should start right away. Great pickup for the Atlanta Falcons. They have another pick in round 2, and they picked up Troy Anderson, linebacker from Montana State. This kid was, he played both sides of the ball there at Montana State, and he really thrived there on the FCS level of college football. He's 6'4" and 245 pounds, and Big Boy ran a 4.42 40-yard dash. He's probably going to need to adjust to the NFL, but he has the size. The speed is clearly there as well. The potential is really there for this to be a good pick for the Atlanta Falcons. We'll just see if he can adjust to the competition and the rise in quality of athletes that he's about to be competing against, right? Let's see if he can step up to the challenge, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So I like it, though. I like them taking a chance on him. They need a linebacker with Oluokun leaving. Maybe this kid is it. I don't know that he's the answer this year. I think it's he's going to have to adjust to the speed of the game on this level. But maybe next year he's ready to go, and maybe he contributes a little bit this year too. Let's not sell him short here. This kid is a heck of an athlete. So Troy Anderson in round 2, good pick, Atlanta. Round 3, again, Matt Ryan gone, Marcus Mariota. You're hoping he can come in and, man, you're hoping he can hold this together and lead your team for the next couple seasons. But then what's the answer at quarterback after that, right? We might have it right here. Round 3, they picked up Desmond Ridder, quarterback from Cincinnati. This is one of the better QB prospects in the NFL draft. It's kind of a less than stellar QB class for the 2022 NFL draft. But Desmond Ridder, he's kind of a diamond there, a diamond there in the mud for the QBs in that whole position. The kid is a good quarterback and has lots of potential. I think it's a good gamble for Atlanta in the 3rd round. Maybe he's the future of their team. He had 3,334 passing yards and 30 touchdowns and 8 interceptions for Cincinnati last season, as he led them to the college football playoffs, the first group of 5 team to make the college football playoffs. So congrats to them for that. Congrats to Desmond Ridder. And I think it was a good gamble here, a good roll of the dice for the Atlanta Falcons, taking a chance on Desmond Ridder. So let's see how that pans out for him. Moving on, we're going to move to round 5. I like this pick as well for the Atlanta Falcons. They picked up Tyler Algier, running back from BYU. I got to watch him play this year as he played my Baylor Bears, Sick'em Bears. Tyler Algier, man, he's a beast. Tyler Algier was formerly a linebacker, and he plays like it on offense, okay? He's not fast. He ran a 4.6 40-yard dash, but he sure is a tough and effective runner. He's 5'11" and 220 pounds. Algier rushed for 1,600 yards and 23 touchdowns for BYU last year. So even though he's considered somewhat slow, the kid found a way to pick up yards, okay? He knows what to do with the football once he has it in his hands. He's not the most shifty back, but give him a little space to make a cut, and he's going to make most defenders regret that, okay? So let's see how Algier pans out for them. He's going to be a tough bruiser running back. They just need a running back of any kind right now, to be honest. And so they went with the tough guy, Tyler Algier. Let's see how it pays off for him. So that's their draft picks. Let's talk about this whole team and what is it going to look like for them in the 2022 NFL season. Yikes. The Falcons actually look pretty bad. Mariota is a downgrade from Matt Ryan, even with Matt aging into a seasoned veteran. Mariota thrived in college at Oregon. His senior year in Oregon, he threw for 4,454 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. He was off the charts, and that just has not transitioned into the pros for him. And honestly, that was 2014, 2015, I think. So as far as NFL time is concerned, that was ages ago, okay? So it just hasn't worked out for Mariota. So he gets a fresh start here in Atlanta. Let's see how it works out. For some reason, I feel like there's potential still for him, but the situation is just a nightmare right now. Rookie Drake London, Auden Tate, and Brian Edwards make up the wide receiver unit for the Atlanta Falcons. This is one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the NFL, still, even picking up Drake London. To be quite honest, Tate and Edwards need to quadruple their production from recent years for the passing game just to be decent, okay? The The Falcons running back Cordarrelle Patterson, he's a converted wide receiver playing running back for them right now. Mike Williams also needs to step his game up. He's been a bit sluggish the last few years. I would not be surprised if Tyler Algier gets on the field this season, and they may need that kind of bruiser back to get some kind of running game going. And hopefully Big Boy's ready for it because, man, the Atlanta offense could really use him this year, I think. Let's move on to the defense. That does look a little bit better than what the offense is looking like. The defensive front looks good. Grady Jarrett is a solid edge rusher. Taquan Graham gets a chance to step up as the other edge rusher, opposite of Jarrett. And Taquan Graham's in his second year in the NFL, so I imagine the Falcons are hoping he really hits his stride for them on the edge this year. Lorenzo Carter was a good pickup for the Falcons. He had 50 tackles and 5 sacks for the Giants last year. Arnold Ebiketie, man, a high potential rookie, will be on the other side of Lorenzo Carter. The secondary looks pretty good. Bringing in Casey Hayward hopefully helps. The Falcons probably have a middle-tier defensive unit, but the offense looks to drag this whole team down unless the receivers drastically step up. Mariota also has to come in and learn a whole new offensive system with lackluster weapons. The Falcons continue to rebuild, and they're probably going to struggle this year, okay? Moving on to the next team. Next up, we have the Carolina Panthers. And let's talk about what they picked up this offseason. A big pickup right off the bat, linebacker Damian Wilson from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last year, he had 108 tackles and 3 sacks for the Jags. He moves really well for a linebacker that is 6 foot and 243 pounds. Great pickup for Carolina. Kind of expect that. Matt Rule is their head coach. He used to play linebacker back at Penn State. This is a defensive-minded coach. I know he struggled to find his footing here in the NFL, but one thing he does know is defense. He knows it pretty well, and he knows the linebacker position well. Great pickup for Carolina, picking up Damian Wilson. Next, they picked up center Bradley Bozeman from the Ravens. Great pickup because they need to improve their offensive line. Another big one, offensive guard Austin Corbett from the Rams. Then they picked up safety Xavier Woods from the Vikings, who produced 108 tackles and 3 interceptions for the Minnesota Vikings last season. Next, they picked up defensive tackle Matt Ioannidis from the Washington Commanders. Matt started 6 games. He ended last season with 38 tackles and 2.5 sacks with the Commanders. Okay, so that's the beef of what the Carolina Panthers picked up this offseason. Let's talk about what they lost. They lose cornerback Stephen Gilmore to the Colts. It's kind of a big loss. He hasn't produced as much recently, but you're losing a multiple Pro Bowl veteran there at cornerback. You lost edge rusher Hassan Reddick to the Eagles. You lost defensive tackle Daquan Jones to the Bills. And then linebacker Jermaine Carter to the Chiefs. Jermaine Carter just had his best season with the Panthers with 88 tackles last year. Moving on to the draft picks for the Carolina Panthers. In round 1, they picked up Ikem Ekwonu, offensive tackle from Boston College. Big boy is 6'4" and 320 pounds. All the experts have raved about him. This offseason, he's potentially the best offensive lineman coming out of this 2022 class, which is a pretty talented class, especially on the offensive line. He's a big tackle that moves well on film. And again, arguably and potentially the number 1 offensive lineman in this draft class. Good pickup, Carolina. Again, improve the offensive line, which they need to do. Next was round 3, quarterback Matt Corral from Ole Miss. Along with Desmond Ridder, I think Corral is one of the select few QBs from this draft that can potentially be a future starter in the league. Corral passed for 3,329 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions for Ole Miss last year. He also added 614 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground. An incredible season for Matt Corral and Ole Miss last year. Led them to the Sugar Bowl against my Baylor Bears, Sick'em Bears, where they unfortunately lost to my Baylor Bears. But Matt Corral, without a doubt, had an incredible season. He's an incredible talent, and quarterback is a position of need in the future here for Carolina. They're desperately hurting for a new quarterback since Cam Newton has left. And maybe Matt Corral is that guy because he's definitely one of the guys with potential, as I said, from this NFL draft class that could be a starting quarterback here in the NFL. Next, in round 6, they picked up Caden Mays, offensive lineman from Tennessee. This is a project with potential for the O-line here. Maybe not this season, but maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, Caden Mays can really dig in and help contribute to the offensive line here in Carolina. And then the last pick for the Carolina Panthers, in round 7, they picked up Kalen Barnes, cornerback from Baylor, Sick'em Bears. This is another project. He's formerly a receiver at Baylor but moved to defense, and he did well. This guy's got great speed and size. He's 6 foot and 185 pounds, and he ran a blazing 4.23 40-yard dash at the Combine. He was the fastest player at the NFL Combine this season, and he's the second fastest in Combine history. He's not bad in coverage, but he could be a better tackler. So he needs to work on his game, continue to develop, and turn into a better all-around corner. And then maybe in a couple years, maybe even next year, he can start contributing to that Carolina Panthers defense. So let's talk about what the Panthers look like this season as a team. It starts up front, and the Panthers address their offensive line, and they look to have improved it. Christian McCaffrey, man, he just can't get over the injury bug. He has suffered injuries the past 2 seasons, but when he's healthy, he's shown that he can produce and turn out Pro Bowl seasons for the Carolina Panthers. Gosh, they're just itching for this guy to be healthy this season and have a great season. The Panthers and Matt Rule really need him to stay healthy. Chuba Hubbard, he's a grinder. He's also Christian McCaffrey's backup. He grinded out 612 yards just last season for the team, with Christian McCaffrey going down with injury. Getting that kind of experience for Chuba Hubbard, you hope he's ready for a strong season as a solid number 2 running back and as a solid backup for Christian McCaffrey. Turn to the wide receiver position. You hope Terrace Marshall is ready to turn it up after his rookie season. They drafted him in the 2nd round 2 years ago. So you're really hoping Terrace Marshall's ready to go and really start catching the ball and producing some yards for this Carolina Panthers offense. DJ Moore turned in a good season last year, and Terrace Marshall will play the slot receiver. I think that's a good spot for the speedy, shifty receiver that Terrace Marshall is. With the improved O-line, you hope to see Sam Darnold in the passing game take the next step. You actually hope to see it take the next 10, 20 steps if possible, right? Because they've got a lot to go. They really need to improve on the offensive side of the ball, especially the passing game. Darnold was just flat out bad last year with 2,527 yards passing, only 9 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. The Panthers need a huge season out of him. Can he deliver that? Let's move on to the defense. Defensively, they have a well put together unit. They have Pro Bowl edge rusher Brian Burns coming back. Last season, he turned in 50 tackles and a whopping 9 sacks. Good job, Brian Burns, and hopefully he can produce that for the Carolina Panthers again this season. They have some nice defensive tackles on the inside with Derek Brown. They picked up Matt Ioannidis again in the offseason, And then, man, let's not forget about big boy Bravion Roy, who will be brought into the rotation as well. They are massive when Bravion Roy and Derek Brown are in there. You're talking about 650 pounds between the two of them just to wreak havoc on the inside. So that's a big deal to have that well assembled. The defensive line looks really good for Carolina. The only thing is just Roy just doesn't possess the stamina to last a whole game, which is why Ioannidis is a great addition to that defensive line. I like the linebacker crew. Shaq Thompson played well at will linebacker last year, and I think you improved by adding Damian Wilson at the Sam linebacker. So these linebackers look real good. Good pickup with Damian Wilson. Great having Shaq Thompson there. This defense, as far as the front seven is shaping up, looks really good. Moving on to the secondary, you have safety Jeremy Chin, who's a high performer back there. Your second-year cornerback and your first-round draft pick from 2 years ago, J.C. Horn. He really looked great, and he did not look like a rookie too many times last season. So, man, you're just counting on him to produce an awesome second year here in Carolina. And then you added safety Xavier Woods to the bunch. The Panthers have to love how their defense is looking right now. Good job this offseason in making it even better. When you've looked at what the Panthers have done this offseason, you have to like it. But can the Panthers front office and fans deal with Sam Darnold another year, possibly two, while Matt Corral is getting himself ready to take over the offense? You look at how bad Darnold performed last year, and you wonder why he wasn't replaced in free agency, right? Baker Mayfield is still available and an upgrade from Darnold. Why hasn't that been done? I don't know, but it looks like the Panthers are banking on improving the offensive line as the answer they need to make this offense, look better than it looked last year, and hopefully to improve on a terrible passing game from a year ago, okay? So we'll see how it all works out, all right? Let's move on to the next team. Next up, you have the New Orleans Saints. Before we even get into their losses and pickups this free agency offseason, right off the bat, Coach Sean Payton, he shockingly steps away as head coach for the New Orleans Saints. They have named Dennis Allen, who was promoted from defensive coordinator, as their head coach for this next season. Dennis Allen was previously a head coach for the Oakland Raiders. He stepped into a rebuild process over there too, and man, he had a bad time running the Oakland Raiders. Dennis went 8 of 28 before the Raiders fired him. Now he's stepping into an even more bizarre situation, but he has some good pieces that are being brought in to hopefully help him out here. Let's get into the rest of the offseason now for the New Orleans Saints. Let's talk about who they picked up now. Great pickup. 5-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Jarvis Landry. It was a down year for Landry and the Browns last season as him and his QB were playing through injuries. Landry, in particular, had a rib fracture last year. Ouch. But he tried to play through it, but again, just had a down year last year. Going to New Orleans is going home for him. He's from Convent, Louisiana, and was a second-team All-SEC receiver at LSU. Moving on to the next player that the New Orleans Saints picked up this offseason. It's another homecoming party taking place with 4-time Pro Bowl safety Tyrann Mathieu. The Honey Badger is coming back home from the Kansas City Chiefs, another Louisiana product and LSU product. He had a great season for the Chiefs, though, last season with 76 tackles and 3 interceptions. Next player that they picked up this offseason, QB Andy Dalton from the Chicago Bears. Serviceable backup quarterback for you. Last pickup of note here was safety Daniel Sorensen. They also picked him up from the Kansas City Chiefs. Sorensen, on paper, he produced decent numbers for the Chiefs, but fans were really tired of him breaking down in coverage. They felt like he was a weak link in the secondary for them. Let's see if a fresh start for Daniel Sorensen helps him in his career. It also helps the New Orleans Saints. So let's talk about the losses now. Let's move into the losses for the New Orleans Saints. Right off the bat, big loss with Pro Bowl tackle Terron Armstead. He's headed off to the Miami Dolphins, and the deal here was money. He signed a big 5-year deal that's going to pay him $17.5 million per year. Go get your money, Terron Armstead. So he's moving on to the Miami Dolphins, and I'm sure Tua Tagovailoa is going to appreciate having him down there, right? Next loss was safety Marcus Williams to the Ravens. He was a pretty good safety for the Saints. 74 tackles and 2 interceptions last season. Next loss that they have is quarterback Trevor Siemian to the Bears. He turned in respectable numbers for the Saints last year in the few games he played and started. He had 1,154 yards passing with 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Basically what happened here and what it boiled down to is the Saints had a choice to make, and they chose Jameis Winston. Okay? So let's move into the draft picks now for the New Orleans Saints. The Big Easy, baby. How's that look for the New Orleans Saints? Right off the bat, they had a couple picks in round 1. And the first one in round 1 that they took wide receiver Chris Olave from Ohio State. They took one of the best wide receivers in the draft. I really like Chris Olave a lot. Great player, great football player, and great receiver. He was a 1,000-yard receiver from Ohio State, a good, shifty, reliable receiver. This is a great pick. At the time, the Saints did not have Jarvis Landry yet on the roster, and they desperately needed to beef up the wide receiver room. So good pick, New Orleans Saints with Chris Olave here. Next pick in round 1 was Trevor Penning, offensive tackle from Northern Iowa. The big guy dominated in FCS football, and he also showed out in the Senior Bowl. They definitely needed another tackle with Terron Armstead moving on. Great pickup by the Saints again. Moving on to round 2, they picked up safety Alontae Taylor from Tennessee. Taylor had 60 tackles and 2 interceptions at Tennessee last year. He's 6 foot and 193 pounds, and he clocked a 4.36 40. Man, that's very fast for a safety, and for that reason, it looks like the Saints will move him over to cornerback when they bring him into New Orleans. And the great thing about this pick is if you need him to, he's capable of also playing the safety position. This was a good, versatile pick for the Saints. That's what I want to talk about as far as the NFL draft for the Saints. Those are the picks that need to be highlighted. So let's talk about them as a team, as a whole, and what they look like moving into the season this year. The Saints had lots of holes to fill, but man, they did a dang good job of filling them this offseason and knowing what they needed and going out and getting it. Good job, New Orleans. Good job for real. Good job. Offensively, Jameis Winston looks to start at QB, and he didn't do too bad last year when he started. He managed the ball really well, which is surprising because the big joke on Jameis Winston was, he was really terrible, with touchdown to interception ratio there in Tampa Bay. And then, of course, the other thing is, we're eating them W's. Got to eat them W's. So the Saints are going to count on him to eat them W's for them, and hopefully he produces, right? Okay, so let's move on from the quarterback position. Let's talk about the backfield. Definitely a big highlight for the Saints here. The Saints have a proven backfield with 5-time Pro Bowler Alvin Kamara and 3-time Pro Bowler Mark Ingram. The receivers, you have 3-time Pro Bowler Michael Thomas coming back from injury, and 5-time Pro Bowler coming in, this offseason, Jarvis Landry, and he looks to be playing the slot. And then you've got sensational rookie Chris Olave ready to come in and play right away as well. So that's looking like your wide receiver core, and it's looking pretty dang good. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chris Olave play some slot this season as the Saints look for mismatches. And, Jarvis Landry could move from slot to the outside at times because Jarvis is extremely capable, being a veteran in the league now. I say this because the projections are for Jarvis to start in the slot and Olave to start on the, at outside receiver. The Saints definitely missed Michael Thomas last year when he was injured. Everybody that's Saints related, they're going to be happy to see Michael Thomas back on the field this year. Moving on defensively, the Saints have 7-time Pro Bowler Cameron Jordan still on the edge for them. Last season, Cameron Jordan turned out 59 tackles and a whopping 12.5 sacks. On the other side of Cameron Jordan, you've got Marcus Davenport, and he also turned in 9 sacks himself last year. So the Saints are very strong at the edge position. They may be a little weak in the middle of that defensive line, though. But I think they might just make that up. They make that up with Demario Davis. He's a great linebacker coming back. Last year he had 105 tackles and 3 sacks. Next to him is Pete Werner. He's coming in. Now will be his second season. 2 seasons ago they drafted him out of Ohio State. The Saints are certainly hope to see Pete grow, in some of his production from last year. And then, they definitely could use it since the interior of their defensive line is not necessarily all that strong. So they really need Pete Werner to step up a little bit for this defensive unit to be as great as it can be, because it definitely has potential to be really good. Moving on to the secondary. They really beefed up the secondary this offseason. Of course, you had the Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu. You're bringing him back to New Orleans, to Louisiana and into New Orleans this offseason. That's a great pickup. And then you have Marcus Lattimore at corner. The Saints have a really solid secondary. I also like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in the nickelback hybrid position for the Saints too. This is a good team. And just like the Carolina Panthers, though, this is going to be on the QB. This is on Jameis Winston this year. And it's all on him how good these New Orleans Saints are really going to be as a football team this year, okay? So that's all the teams, right? So let's get into my way too early predictions of what this NFC South is going to look like this upcoming NFL season. So let's start this off. Number 1, of course, it's your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady is back, and the Bucs have good targets for him, and they also have a solid defense. Basically, the NFC South, this is all Tampa Bay Buccaneers and then whoever else, really, okay? Chalk it up. Tampa Bay Buccaneers win this division again this year, okay? Number 2, this is where it starts to tighten up. The number 2 and number 3 position, I like the top 3 teams in this division, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the number 2 position to the New Orleans Saints. I think this is paper thin between them and the Carolina Panthers. I like both squads, but I think what it boils down to is just Sam Darnold was just downright bad last year. If Jameis can protect the football and get the ball to all the weapons that the New Orleans Saints have given him, then the Saints can have a really good season. So moving on to number 3. And you probably guessed it from that discussion. Number 3, I have the Carolina Panthers. What's holding them back, as I just mentioned? Sam Darnold. Surely he improves a little bit behind that offensive line that they assembled this offseason. But, man, just even before the struggles he had just last season, Darnold just really hasn't panned out in the pros. Hopefully this isn't such a bad decision that cost Matt Rule his job, because they really have improved the rest of the team this offseason. And Matt Rule and his staff have done a good job of doing that. maybe they can still go sign Baker Mayfield. Let's see what happens. But as of today, if Sam Darnold's the quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, he's probably holding this team back a little bit. And then last but not least, number 4 in the division, the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are in rebuild mode, to put it plain and simple. They lose their franchise veteran quarterback, and they bring in struggling Marcus Mariota to replace him. They drafted a good prospect in wide receiver Drake London, but he's coming back from injury, and he's still looking like the best option at receiver for them, even coming back from injury. The running game doesn't look to be getting them too far this season. They have a decent defense, but they have way too many holes on offense for them to jump out in this division this year, okay? So those are my way too early picks for the NFC South this offseason. I feel like you can book that unless just something crazy happens. Maybe if the Carolina Panthers go pick up Baker Mayfield, maybe it does help them improve a little bit and maybe help them overtake the Saints for the number 2 spot in this division. That could possibly do it. But if Sam Darnold's the guy, I feel like you can book this prediction right here, okay? So that's what I have for the NFC South, okay? I really appreciate y'all again for tuning in. I really hope that you're enjoying the material and the content that I'm giving y'all. If you're here for the first time, please do me a huge favor. When this video is done, hit the subscribe button. And if we're not talking about your division today, look back at the past few episodes and see if I've covered them. I've done the AFC North, I've done the AFC West, and just go see who I've covered and take a listen and see who I have for my way too early predictions for those divisions as well. Okay, so let's keep the show moving. Next, we're going to talk about the NBA playoffs, and it's the conference finals right now. Let's start with the Eastern Conference and Game 1 that happened there. You have the Celtics and the Heat. The Celtics had a meltdown in the third quarter of Game 1 to really summarize this up quickly, and it absolutely cost them the game. Even with that said, I like the Celtics in this series, and I like them even more if Marcus Smart can come back and play and contribute and come back healthy from that injury. So let's see how that shapes up. I'm really interested in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think this one's going to be a fun one. So if you get a chance to watch those games, be sure to tune in. The Celtics and Heat, it should be a fun one. The Western Conference Finals, Game 1, as of recording, that happened tonight. And man, my Dallas Mavericks, man, they went in, and played the Golden State Warriors on their home court. Man, I mean, just all I can say is that the Warriors came out hot Game 1. Hats off to the Warriors. Steph Curry and that whole team, man, they were just clicking. And there was just nothing the Mavs could do about it. But it's a long series. Let's see how it shapes up. But that game finished up 112-87. Of course, my heart wants to go with the Mavs. And it's possible. I mean, they just knocked off the Phoenix Suns to get here, the number 1 seed to get to this position. So if they play tough like they did that last series, I think they could take it. I think they very well could take this to Game 7 and potentially win this series. But they're going to have to play well at home, and they're going to have to keep their heads up and grind this one out. Realistically, though, if the Warriors, continue to shoot like they've been shooting, man, it's the Warriors. The Warriors are going to take this series, okay? So we'll see how it plays out. It could be interesting. It could be a bloodbath if the Warriors continue to play the way that they played tonight. So that's what I have for the NBA playoffs, okay? I know it's short, but, man, we're wrapping up this season. As soon as these conference finals wrapped up, we'll be at the NBA finals. Should be a fun one. Let's see how these conference finals shape up. Let's move on to the next section of the show. Normally, I've been talking about college football recruiting, but we're not going to do that today. We have lots of time to talk about that, that recruiting class, and it's going to shape up as the football season starts to dive in and really take shape. recruits will start figuring out where they want to go, and there'll be lots to talk about here in the future. Okay, but so on today's show, we're gonna talk a little bit of boxing. We're going to talk about the Canelo fight. Canelo Alvarez, he fought Cinco de Mayo weekend. What he did was he moved up to fight Dimitri Bivol. Canelo was ranked as the pound-for-pound best boxer in the world, so a lot of people really thought he had a shot. Bivol was actually the underdog in his weight class. Okay, lots of hype around Canelo, and rightfully so. I mean, talented boxer. Canelo is the unified middleweight class champ. That's the 168-pound weight class. Dimitri Bivol, he's the undefeated light heavyweight champ, and he holds the WBA belt in that division. That division fights at 174 pounds, and that's what Canelo moved up to. As much power and speed that Canelo has displayed in the middleweight class, he just did not have the same effective power moving up. He really tagged Bivol with some good uppercuts throughout the fight, but it didn't really faze Bivol at all, and certainly not at the level it phases these middleweight fighters that Canelo has fought in the past. Canelo is 5'8", and Bivol is 6 foot. What Bivol was able to do was to keep Canelo at a distance, using impressive footwork and technique to not allow Canelo inside. All night long, Bivol, he kept his guard up and he kept Canelo at a distance, and he really punished Canelo all night. Bivol is a great champ. Canelo just doesn't have the size to compete for belts at the light heavyweight weight class. Kudos to Canelo for taking this fight and taking that chance and going for it. Canelo suffers his second loss of his career. He has lost to Floyd Mayweather and now Dimitri Bivol. Moving on to UFC, and this is going to be the last portion of my show. I really want to talk about UFC because, we're in the midst of history here for this sport. That's really taken steam over the last decade, 2 decades or so. And basically what happened was at UFC 274, Charles Oliveira, he lost his lightweight championship belt before the fight even happened. And what happened was that he missed weight by half a pound. So before the fight even happened, Charles Oliveira had to forfeit his lightweight championship belt. This is the first time it's ever happened at UFC. Oliveira still fought that night, and he won. So he's now classified as the #1 contender, I believe. And since he missed weight, he will still have to fight another fight to try to win the belt back. Okay. So we're in the middle of what to figure out what's next here in the UFC. Who fights Oliveira? It looks like 2 things could happen here. Dariush versus Makhachev could happen, and it could be scheduled, and the winner of that fight would fight Oliveira, or the fight might just be given to Makhachev. His training partner Khabib is really pushing for that fight just to take place right now, just because Makhachev, he's 10-0 in his last fights. Dariush and Makhachev were originally scheduled to fight for UFC 202, but Dariush had to pull out of that due to a fractured fibula. So no clue what Dana White decides to do here as far as how this shapes up to find out who gets the lightweight championship belt. He admittedly said it best. Dariush versus Makhachev is the fight that should happen, but Makhachev and Oliveira right off the bat has a lot of draw to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep an eye on this and see how history continues to unfold and fall into place here in the UFC. Okay? So stay tuned to find out more about that as we find out more. So that's it, folks. Appreciate y'all. I really hope y'all enjoyed the show again. I know I really zoomed through that, but thanks for hanging in there with me. I know everybody has their own lives to live, and thank you for for turning me on and turning me up, giving me a listen. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you think any of my information is wrong, that's cool. Comment in the comment sections and let me know what you think is going to take place, and we can certainly talk about it. Okay, I would love to talk to you about sports. That's the whole reason for this show. This thing makes the world a better place. Sports does, right? Okay, so I'd love to talk to you. Find me on social media at Talk Sports Mesa. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Okay, and reach out to me. Let's talk sports and let's continue to dissect this NFL offseason and start continue to make our predictions on all of the divisions that we have left to predict. After we do that, what's really fun for me, a big passion of mine, is college football. We'll start breaking down how these Power 5 teams look. We'll go through the SEC, Big 12, ACC, Pac-12, and the Big 10. We'll go through them and look at how the teams that they have coming up, who's on top, who's on the bottom, who looks like they could possibly make a run at the college football playoffs, who are sleeper teams this year. We're going to break all that down on my podcast, okay? So keep rocking with me. I'll continue to bring you great content. I appreciate you. What we'll do is we'll catch up with you next week, okay? Thanks a lot for tuning in. This is Chris Mesa. I'm out. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next week, okay?